So, welcome to another Mindcraft videocast. My name is Dr. Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with Dr. Paula Willoquet. Here in this, as you can see behind this gorgeous, gorgeous campus. And Paula is, I'm just so excited for this, a non-violent communication coach and trainer. So we're going to hear about what nonviolent communication is. You want to get us going?
Sure. Thank you, Kim, for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and to share about nonviolent communication. So the simplest way maybe is to say nonviolent communication is a particular framework for communication, for communicating with people, for us to communicate with each other, for groups to communicate. And it's a language. It has a certain structure. It has a certain vocabulary. So we approach communication in a certain way. But more than a language, it's a consciousness. It's the intention and the consciousness with which we approach a dialogue with another person, any kind of dialogue, but very useful when we have difficult conversations or when we're talking about topics where people have very strong feelings. Nonviolent communication really helps us be in a frame of mind to listen deeply to what the other person is thinking and feeling about a certain topic.
So active listening.
Active listening.
What I'm really hearing from you too. I know there's some certain, I have to cheat a little bit. I got quite a list here. So objectives wise, can you tell us maybe, Paul, what are some of the objectives of nonviolent communication?
Well, oftentimes when people are in a heated conversation, what do they want to do? They want to convince the other person that they're right. They want to change their mind. So nonviolent communication approaches the conversation very differently. That the point is really first to understand where the other person is coming from, and to connect, to have a connection. The point is not to agree.
Right. Okay.
So that's very different.
That's different from what I think that I would think.
Yeah.
It's not about agreement at all.
It's not about agreement. It's about curiosity. It's about really listening deeply. So not just active listening, but listening deeply. Listening with your full presence.
Right.
I don't know about you, but oftentimes when I'm listening to someone, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. So the training in nonviolent communication is to kind of quiet that part of the brain and really tune in and connect with the other person and have a curiosity about where they're coming from, rather than, what am I going to say next in response? Does that make sense?
It makes a whole lot of sense. I'm just thinking, I couldn't help that my mind, Paul, went from the individual to kind of like the world. If I'm thinking mediation, my mind's going all over the place.
Yeah, mediation. Nonviolent communication is a really useful tool in mediation. There is a particular style of mediation that's based on nonviolent communication.
Right.
That really is effective in getting people to come together and to kind of get beyond that tension that prevents them from hearing each other.
Wow. So yeah, that's right away where mine went. You got to undo that, and let me get it out. Excellent. Okay, so and I know that from you, because you sent me some, I did my homework here, that nonviolent communication has certain principles and practices. Do you want to tell us about those?
Yeah, so the principles are what I named, connection and understanding. The practice is in sort of the use of a certain structure. So let's say you did something and I feel a bit upset about
Right.
it, and I want to have a conversation
Right.
with you about it. So if I take a nonviolent communication approach, I'm going to do 4 things. I'm going to share with you an observation about what it is that I found upsetting. I'm going to tell you my feelings. I felt sad, or I felt surprised, or I felt confused, or I felt even angry. So observation, feelings. I'm going to try to convey to you my needs. What need was not met? Let's say you were late for a meeting with me, and I was upset. First I was worried.
Right.
Then I was confused. Then I was upset. So what might be the need behind these feelings? I had these feelings because certain needs weren't met. So feelings and needs. And then maybe I might have a request to make of you. So observations, that is just sort of the way a camera would see it, you know? What was said, what was done in an observation, a description, that's an observation. What did I feel? What need wasn't met? And do I have a request? And we can talk about each of these components because there's a lot to unpack in each one of them. But that's sort of the 4-step model. That's the sort of the basic structure of using nonviolent communication.
Right. And I also, I've seen here before, so the empathy is a big component, right?
Yes.
Empathetic listening.
Empathy is the basis of it. And Marshall Rosenberg, who was the sort of creator of this approach to communication, one of the principles for him is this belief, that human beings, deep down, ultimately, in our nature, we want to get along.
Oh, totally.
We want to make life more wonderful for ourselves and for others. So this listening we were talking about is listening with presence, is empathic listening. Listening with care and curiosity.
I like that you said listening with presence, right? Did you just say that?
I said that.
That's such a nice ring because it's visual. It's because, you know, I'm very into mindfulness.
Yeah.
So to me, this is mindful
listening.
I'm in this minute.
Yes.
Right now. And there's nobody more important than you in this minute. I'm clued in, tapped in, tuned in, turned on, right here.
That's right. Exactly.
I love this.
Well said.
Well, I love this. Imagine, I just can think, this can only go good places with relationships. I wasn't trying to be cheesy when I said globally, because think about the disconnect on a big level. I was being sincere, actually. And so there's a lot of this about being connected, especially in an age where there's so much disconnection, because I'm thinking here in the States, we're very fast paced, right? Media saturated.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Media saturated.
Yeah, slowing down is a big part of it. So if I really want to listen to you with full presence, I need to create some space for that. If I keep interrupting you, you're not going to feel heard. So slowing down and creating space. And there's something we say, like listening to people until the end of words. Listening until they've said everything that they had to say. So that's one component of it. Another part of it is I might want to check with you that I'm understanding you well. So I might want to say, hey, can I check, Kim, before you go on? I want to make sure I'm really understanding what you're saying. And I might reflect what you just said and then ask you, did I get this right? That does 2 things. One is I can check with myself that I am understanding you in the way that you mean, the way you want to be understood. And it also helps you, number 1, feel heard. And number 2, helps you hear whether you're actually conveying what you want to convey. And oftentimes when people hear a reflection, they say, well, wait, let me clarify. What I really meant to say is blah, blah, blah. So it really slows down the conversation.
I got that.
Yeah.
Which is important because we are just on this, we fly around like gerbils on crack, right? I mean, we do. And we're not really, I think, listening to each other on a level that we are capable of. And that we all need, because actually, our colleague Lindsay Godwin right before us, I had Marshall Rosenberg with her too, actually, a different conversation. But there was a similarity with really, attenuating. And actually also, my chat before that was really about being fully present.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that so difficult for us?
Like which you were saying earlier, the fast pace, the media, we're always on the go.
And not conscious, really. I mean, we're conscious, obviously.
Yeah.
But the autopilot that we just buzz around on, that we're missing stuff.
Yeah.
I think, and this sounds like a way to connect on a level that's far more mindful and present, kind of synonymous, I suppose. And then and more intimate.
Definitely very intimate, yeah.
Which is what we want. This is it, this is our lives.
Well, that's how we feel connected, right? Well, and there's also a piece of vulnerability, and I think that's a part of it too, right? I would say most of us are afraid to be vulnerable.
I would agree with you.
Right?
And I would agree with you. And I think what a big fan of Oprah I am. She's one of my dearest friends. She just doesn't know. Also, Brene Brown's on our friendship.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And I know you know of Brene,
and
of
she
course.
talks a lot about
vulnerability
compassion and vulnerability. Yeah.
And she does. And she talks about how much courage
Yes.
it takes to be vulnerable, because it's perceived as a weakness. We don't want to go. It's like that naked on a tree branch feeling, right?
Yeah.
But when we do brave that gap of awkwardness and fear and everything, the reward when you come out on the other end of what you do is got to be huge.
It's huge. So the reward, I see it as you feel more connected to yourself and you feel more connected to the other person.
Which I think that is so. I'll tell you where my mind just went.
And
Paula.
that's where understanding comes from. When we can connect and we care. Then,
on a real level.
On a real level. Then there is understanding. And whether there's agreement or not. Like I can understand and not agree. I don't need to hold it against you.
Right.
Yeah, I can understand that given what you shared with me, you would feel this way. I may have a different experience, but my experience doesn't invalidate your experience and vice versa.
No, I like that, because you're saying, like, I understand doesn't mean I need to agree. So I understand also means in a genuine way. I think it's so important that it's not a patronizing, because people can tell that, even if you're nodding and smiling. You can tell, I can anyway, right? If they're coming from I think 5-year-olds can tell when people are being patronizing. But I get that based on what I know of what you're saying, this makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Because I think we get the term understanding and agreeing confused. Sometimes when people say, yeah, I understand, that what they're really saying is, I agree.
But they don't have to go together.
But they don't have to go together.
I think that definitely gets confused when I think about it. It also has me thinking, we could all used to be a little more impeccable, myself included, more impeccable with our words. I'm thinking of Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements in there. With if we were more careful with our wording, there'd be a lot less miscommunication on the receiving end.
Yeah, well, and that's the beauty of checking. Can I check that I'm understanding what you're saying? You're saying that if we were more careful with our words, there would be less miscommunication. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And excellent. And also, I think also when we are more careful, more accurate with more precise is even a better word. More precise with our wording, it also does a lot of reduction of, there's not a lot of unnecessary drama that happens. Unnecessary pain is kind of maybe a big word for what we're talking about, but harm, even the slightest little hurt feelings, we were more clear.
Yeah. Yeah, but here's the thing. Let's say, you try to be as clear as you could, but, you said what you said. And I'm like, I want to check with Kim what she meant by that.
Right.
Instead of going, that Kim, what did she say to me? Right? It's like, let me check first. Let me check my assumptions. Let me check whether she meant to do this or that, to say this or that. So I think we go with assumptions a lot. Now, the other thing that's a big kind of part of this vulnerability that people feel when they start to learn NVC. So I do both training of people on using the form, and I also coach people when they're needing to have a difficult conversation, with a family member or at work. I use NVC to coach them. So one of the things that people feel really vulnerable about is talking about feelings. Mm-hmm. Although as a society, we've gotten a lot better about that, right? We're able to identify feelings and talk about feelings. And sometimes we often say, I feel, but what follows is not a feeling. Like, I feel that
blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 that this person was really mean. Or I feel that I'm never heard, I'm never listened to, I'm never paid attention to. Well, we use the word feel, but we're not talking about feelings. What we're talking about is thoughts.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
It does to me.
So when I say I feel that nobody ever listens to me, well, I have this thought that nobody ever listens to me.
Right.
And maybe I feel sad, and I feel upset, and I feel angry, and I feel alone. So sometimes we use the word feeling, but we're not talking about feelings. We're talking about thoughts. So in NVC training, we learn to notice, when am I having a thought, and when am I really connecting to a feeling?
I like that.
Thought versus feeling.
Well, yeah, because as you know, I'm in the trade, and the other with the Minecraft, which the foundation is thoughts are first, feelings second, and thoughts are the language of the mind, and feelings are the language of the body.
Yeah, language of the body, language of the heart.
Yes, I'm hearing what you're saying about that, because, like when you said I'm feeling that's like a whole situation.
Yeah,
it's the feeling. So you're like you just said. It's more like a noticing or an observation, which I know you're going to talk about too. I've observed that I'm not being listened to. Let's say it's a partner. I'm not being listened to, right? But the feeling is angry, sad, lonely, betrayed. I don't know.
Well, but so if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, I'm not being listened to is already an evaluation of what's happening.
Okay.
So let's say, is it okay that I keep using you as the example?
No, it's totally fine.
So let's say you and I are having a conversation, and you have a lot to say as well.
Right.
But I have a lot to say, and I'm feeling really eager to say. Mm-hmm. And so I have this idea in my mind that you're not listening to me. But if I were going to make the observation might say, Kim is talking for a long time.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you're not listening to me, but that's how I'm kind of receiving it. That's how my need to express myself is not being met, and I may be feeling upset. So there's actually observation, thought, and feeling. Those are like three different realms. And they get all confused. We confused feelings with thoughts. We confuse thoughts with observations. So NVC helps us slow down.
I'm hearing
to notice what is really an observation, a description of what's happening, versus my thought about what's happening, versus my feelings about what's happening.
No, I like this a lot. And what I'm also hearing, Paula, is really what this comes in a more broad sense, because you're the expert on this, but it's what in a line with not just what I do with Minecraft, but I live my life that way too, right? So the alignment part for me is this is really about living more deliberately, because we're not getting lost in the noise, and this, we're not getting lost, and we're like honing in on the real.
Comes back to the presence that we were talking about. Yeah. So talking about feelings is a place of vulnerability for people. So the other place of vulnerability, which I think is even a bigger place of vulnerability than feelings, is needs. I often ask people, so if I say I have a need, or if people start talking about the needs, what do you think? What does it mean to you? How do you react to it? And I don't know, you want to take some guesses on how people might react to this idea of having needs? Like in our culture generally, like
what comes to my mind?
Yeah, what comes to mind about the way, what is our relationship to this idea of having needs?
Let's like a specific example, like it's partners, or if it's at a workplace, those are different, I think. But it sounds a selfish connotation.
It sounds selfish, right?
Like you're needy and codependent and maybe immature.
Yeah,
and
needy,
suck it up
codependent, immature, selfish. We have these associations.
Right. It's negative.
With the word need.
Right.
Well, need from an NVC standpoint is none of those things. Needs, when we talk about needs in nonviolent communication, and I use the acronym NVC for short. So needs are universal.
Right.
We all have needs. We have needs in different categories, right? Needs for connection, needs for care, needs for love, needs for partnership, physical needs for foods, for sustenance, need for understanding, need for meaning, need for creativity.
All of it.
All of it.
I'm thinking of Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Food, shelter, blah, 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 blah.
So when we learn NVC, there's a whole list of feelings and there's a whole list of needs. And the premise is that when our needs are met, we have pleasant feelings.
Mm-hmm.
When our needs are not met, we have unpleasant feelings. And notice I'm not saying positive or negative, good or bad. I'm saying pleasant or unpleasant.
Mm-hmm. It's unpleasant to be hungry.
It's unpleasant to be hungry.
Or thirsty.
Yeah.
Or lonely.
Or lonely, exactly.
Or without affection rolls into lonely, but it's physical.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And uncomfortable, maybe.
And uncomfortable, yeah.
Because I think of discomfort, unpleasant, but I think of I think most people have been, obviously somewhat more than others, but I think we've all experienced a moment of hunger, and it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable.
And all we can think about
we can feel it in our bodies.
Yes, it's visceral. All we can think about is satiating that. We cannot take on anything else until we take care of it.
I love your example of hunger because that's such a relatable example.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if I'm really hungry right now, and my stomach is hurting, I'm preoccupied with my hunger, my need for food is not being met, it's hard for me to pay attention to what you're saying.
I know that's
true. So it's hard
for me.
to be present when a need is unmet.
No, that's definitely true. I'm thinking physical needs might be like with Maslow's hierarchy, right? The bottom one with food and water and everything, we can't do anything. And then it goes up to like the transcendent stuff. And what do you think, Paula, too, about after, let's just say the physical needs are met, if we don't have the esteem needs, I'm thinking with the hierarchy or the affection, I don't even mean romantically, with a friend, hugs, anything, like what happens when those needs aren't met relationally?
So, with the hierarchy of needs, we're talking about kind of needs in general, like needs for survival. Let's say needs for to be able to function in the world.
Right.
But we have needs all the time.
Daily.
Well, daily, hourly, minute by minute.
Right.
in a particular conversation, in an outing. So
What about like needs, like I'm thinking workplace because we're sitting.
yeah.
So need to impress a dean at a meeting, or need, that came out of nowhere, or need to
Well, so from a nonviolent
finish a project
yeah, so it might be finishing a project
or grading papers.
and grading papers and finishing a project from a nonviolent communication standpoint would not be a need.
Okay.
It would be a strategy to meet a need.
Okay, all right.
It would be the thing that I'm gonna do to meet a need. Let's say, because I was a teacher for 30 years, grading papers.
Yes, my favorite.
Let's say I want to connect with my students. I want to support my students. I want to care for my students. And one way that I do that is by grading their exams, as giving them their grades back, giving them their papers back right away. So spending the weekend grading is a strategy that I'm gonna use in order to meet my need to care for my students by giving them feedback as soon as possible.
I got that, okay. And maybe, impressed wasn't the word I meant to use before, but, and let's say just to, because it's a reality, right? Whenever there's a hierarchy,
yeah,
to satisfy being the good graces of it doesn't mean it's not authentic.
right.
You might love what you do. I do love what I do,
Yeah.
actually, on both sides of my role, right?
Yeah.
And that said, that's part of it is
Well,
checking certain boxes.
yeah, so let me take a guess. Maybe it's like, well, my need for contribution. I want to make a contribution to the organization.
Right, exactly.
I want my need to lend my support. My need to connect with my boss. So
And those are all said positively too. It's not like it's a bad thing. It's a good thing.
well, meeting one's needs is always a good thing.
Versus what other people think, though. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you're saying, because you separated and clarified for me that these other things like the grading the papers or meeting goes well with somebody who's considered in a power differential spot, let's just say that, because when we're relate to everybody, right? That's just a way to get to a comfortable place.
A way to meet the needs. So in nonviolent communication, we call that strategy. So here's a great one, particularly for the academic community. How do you know something is a strategy or not, or a need? Well, first, you can get a list of needs. There are lots of lists floating around. A strategy, the acronym for strategies is PLATO. You can remember that, PLATO.
Oh, yeah.
So, place is a strategy. No, people. I want to cheat and remember exactly.
It's okay. I can edit. I saw Plato and I thought you meant Plato.
Yeah. So
him.
What are things that we can do to meet needs? Those, we call them strategies. And a nice acronym that I like to use is PLATO. So P stands for people. When we say, if I want you to do something to meet a need of mine, you're my strategy.
Okay, all right.
You're my strategy for meeting a need. If you're not able to do this thing, then I'm going to go look for another strategy. So that way I don't blame you. I don't say, well, you didn't pick up the milk. Or you didn't, I don't need to blame you for it. I say, well, I had used you, I had asked you, I might be disappointed, but you were simply my strategy.
To get from here to there.
You're not responsible for my need. But if we have an agreement, it's nice to know that we're going to honor the agreement. So people, location, a particular action, a particular time, and an object. Those are all ways of thinking of strategies to meet a need. They're not needs. I know this sounds abstract.
No, I follow you.
You follow me?
Well, obviously, I think when anyone has their area of expertise, the rest of us kind of are sort of lingering behind you a little bit, but I'm following you though. I do get it.
Yeah.
Because it's like an underneath, it's layers, sort of.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, and so many times we say, you know, like we want others to do things for us, and we blame them for how we feel.
Which doesn't go anywhere good.
It doesn't go anywhere good.
In general.
So part of nonviolent communication is also to start to kind of take responsibility for our own feelings and for, I don't know, deepening our understanding, our views on how we can be more the agents of our own happiness.
Oh, I like that.
Which doesn't mean being independent,
right.
Because from a nonviolent communication point, we are all interdependent.
Right. In a healthy way.
In a healthy way, yeah. Like not codependent,
right.
not independent, not dependent, but
mutually dependent.
Interconnected and interdependent. But another important concept in nonviolent communication is choice, is valuing everyone always being in choice about what they do and what they don't do.
Which is huge.
Not forcing anybody, not
right.
Not controlling. We talk about power with instead of power over or power under.
Love that.
Power with.
That. It has me thinking of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very different approach, and that's why I was earlier talking about nonviolent communication really being also a consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real shift in how we, how we see interactions and how we relate.
No, I get that. It's sounding just on so many different levels how people could benefit. Because a lot of this, I said, took me straight to leadership. If there were maybe a different, and our leaders have a big job, right? For sure. And they have the ability to make such a gigantic difference, huge ability to make a difference. And I'm thinking this would just add to their toolbox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
In a big way.
There's a lot of work being done in, training,
mm-hmm.
bringing nonviolent communication principles and strategies to organizations.
It just makes a whole lot of sense to me, and helping. If all of us, it's kind of utopia, kind of utopic language. But if we all learned these strategies on the individual level and then group level, and then the power people, let's say that, in all different, from powers of organizations to the whole thing across the world, I just can't imagine.
Yeah, the potential for transforming society,
huge.
In my view, is huge. It's not easy. It's
right.
really simple to understand.
But work.
But it's work. It's hard work.
Right.
There's a process of kind of self-transformation that occurs.
Right.
So it really is not easy. And when I go into a training situation, I want to make sure that I don't give people the impression that it's just a little magic wand that you wave. It takes a lot of work, it takes practice, it takes awareness, but it's super rewarding, and it's been absolutely transformative, in my life, in the lives of others that I've seen.
It seems like that's the way it is in general, Paula, too. Like I say to my
anything
Minecraft,
worth doing.
My Minecraft, and we say, what happens, I say this, maybe not every day, but most days. What happens when we practice anything? And I'll say things like playing soccer, playing the violin. I said robbing banks and laugh.
Yeah.
But whenever we practice, positive, negative, or anywhere in between, we get better. It's where our energy's going.
Well, yeah, and you're very interested, I know, in the work of the mind and neurobiology, and so in the impact of compassion in kind of rewiring our brain and getting us to use our right brain much more than we normally do in the sort of world that we've operate in. So there is a kind of a rewiring of the brain that happens. There's a process of unlearning and a process of
Right.
learning, and new neural pathways get created.
You know, I could talk about neurons all day long. And
Yeah, I know it's one of your favorite topics.
Because as you know, as I say, they kind of, you know, cliche, neurons that wire together, fire together.
That's
So
right.
the more we practice, repeat, the brain loves to
Exactly.
practice, repeat.
Yeah.
We practice the non-violent way of communicating,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other part, if we don't use it, we lose it. Usually that's said in negative. Like if you take the piano lessons, but you don't play it, you forget, right? But in a good way, when we don't use it, we lose it can be good. When have unhealthier ways of communicating, or negative thinking, let's just say.
Yeah,
when we
those-
cease that,
Those were habits
It's
that
pruned.
we developed, right?
it's pruned
Mm-hmm.
and it goes away.
Yeah.
So I mean, I love how this can work, where we can prune away the old, not so good ways of communicating,
Yeah.
and enter in the being. I forgot how you said that. So very eloquently, being, you know, the presence.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of practice being present. Then it also becomes easier to be present.
Mm-hmm.
And we become
Yes.
better at it.
Yes, that's right.
So I'm thinking, I see you've got some fun toys over there. Do you want to
Oh.
tell us what those are about?
Yeah. Do you want to meet my friends?
I do want to meet your friends.
Well, okay. Well, I want to introduce you first to the giraffe.
Excellent. Hi, giraffe. Did it have a name?
Just giraffe.
Just giraffe.
Just
okay.
giraffe. Yeah, so the giraffe is one of the symbols, the symbol in nonviolent communication for listening with compassion, listening and speaking with your heart. And the story goes that Marshall adopted the giraffe as the sort of mascot, if you will, because the giraffe in real life is the mammal with the biggest heart.
I just learned that on this day when I'm a big fan. I thought you meant because they're quiet. There were no vocal cords, right? But I didn't know that till
Yeah.
right before this podcast.
Yeah, so in nonviolent communication, we kind of use the expression, speaking giraffe. That means speaking without judgment, speaking in a, we might call authentic language of feelings and needs.
Right.
And we also talk about listening with giraffe ears. So if you approach me and say, Paula, I'm really upset about something, I want to talk with you. And I said, okay, I'm going to put my giraffe ears on. And I'm going to listen to you with my full attention, and I'm going to listen for, behind the words that you're saying. No matter what you say to me, I'm going to hear the feelings that you're trying to express, the needs that are not being met.
And without judgment, right?
And without judgment. So without judgment, without fixing, without giving advice.
No fixing. Good.
Without saying, oh, don't feel that way. Oops, that's not giraffe language. I have to take my giraffe ears off. Without pity, without...
Just being present.
Just being present. Yeah, just being fully present. So this is the giraffe ears.
I love that.
Now there's another kind of puppet. And this is Mr. Jackal.
They're very cute.
They're very cute. And oftentimes we use both. So what's the jackal? Well, the jackal is the shorthand for language that's judging, that's comparing,
right.
that's criticizing. But it's important to understand why we use jackal language. Behind all of this judgment, behind all of this jackal language, there's a need. There's a need that's not being met. So Marshall Rosenberg would say that jackal is the tragic expression of an unmet need. So it really is about caring for the jackal. Yeah, poor little jackal, what's going on? Are you feeling, and starting to take guesses about what's what's going on? What's behind
Mhm.
all of that, angry language, for
It's like
example?
limbic system
Yeah.
language behavior.
Yeah.
Language or behavior.
And the jackal is longing to be heard at that level. Usually I have a little heart that attaches here to just remind us that the jackal has a hurting heart.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this, Paula, too, because I know you know that, because I'm hearing like limbic system when I hear jackal, coming from a place of maybe trauma or big stress, but, and I love how, we have ways to go with it, with everything, right? But how the trauma starting to change with how we approach it. Instead of, let's say it's a child who's talking jackal, speaking,
Yeah.
instead of what's the matter with her,
Yeah.
what happened to her?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's the underneath.
Yeah, exactly. And giving that child with jackal language some space to talk jackal. So it's not
Let
like
it out, right?
jackal bad, giraffe good.
Right.
No, but let the jackal speak.
And hear her.
And start to take some guesses at what feelings might be behind. And that's another important piece of nonviolent communication, is not telling people how they feel, but taking guesses and asking, are you feeling whatever it is?
Right.
That's very different than saying, you're angry.
Right.
So are you feeling angry because you really
Already
want
asking is more of a
are
question.
you? Exactly.
Instead of point. Excellent. This is just so much food for thought for me, Paul. I'm so happy to have.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of
have you.
information here.
No, it's so good. But really, there is. But whenever there's something new and big that the whole world needs to know about, there's a lot of information, right? But I'm hearing that a lot of the main themes are to be present and mindful and actively listen. And then I heard from you reflective responding, because underneath all of it, like you've been saying, is we all want to be seen, heard, and validated. It's a human condition. Doesn't matter how much money you come from or make now, or what the color of your skin is. We all, wherever you were born in this order, or you're from an urban or rural, none of that matters. Or from what country you're born in, we all need to have our needs met.
We share that common humanity.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And we can all learn to, be more present and more actively listening.
Yeah. You got it. Thank you, Kim. This was wonderful.
It has been such a pleasure to have you, Paula. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, listeners. Okay.
All right.
Well, you did a great job.